Today's Talk About It Tuesday question is, what are the benefits of selling your home in a buyer's market? All right, so let's just be clear on what a buyer's market is versus a seller's market. So a buyer's market usually indicates that there is an advantage to the buyer because there is more inventory of houses available than there are buyers in the marketplace. So we know basic supply and demand, usually when there is more inventory than there are buyers, it drives prices down because there's competition amongst sellers who will compete to lower their price to get the available buyers. And the opposite happens in a seller's market where you have an abundance of buyers and a little bit of inventory and the buyers compete for the small inventory. It drives the prices up because the sellers will pay more because they want the property. So the question is, what are the benefits of selling your home if it is a buyer's market, not a seller's market? So most people say, well, why the heck would you bother selling in a buyer's market? Well, it can be several reasons. One, you could be downsizing because you have way too much house now than you need, and it's expensive to run a house. You could be relocating for a job or for some other reason. You could have gone through a divorce. And the biggest reason probably is because you need the money. And so let's just examine that. Just because it is a buyer's market doesn't mean that there will not be significant equity in the house, meaning that it doesn't mean that the house hasn't gained a great amount of value or worth since you bought it. So if you've had a property for probably 5 years or more, you've gained some equity. So equity, just to be clear, is the difference between what a property is worth and what you owe, right? So that difference, if you owe $100,000 and the property is worth $200,000, is $100,000 in equity. So you've probably gained equity because you've paid down the mortgage and the value has probably gone up at the same time. So you've gained equity in two directions. So if you need that money, then you're going to sell. So let's just start looking at some hidden benefits of selling during a buyer's market. And let's just talk about what could even make that happen. Why would you have more inventory than you have buyers? Because the what you can do with it is going to be totally different based upon the reason why you're in that type of market. So if you look at some big cities like St. Louis, Detroit, Baltimore, Cleveland, even Philly, right, where the main industries that drove those cities and supplied the financial engine for those cities is gone, right? So whether it's manufacturing and usually that's what it is, right? We're talking about a lot of the places in the Rust Belt where those economic engines have gone, you'll see a mass exodus of people. So when there's a mass exodus of people, then it creates an abundance of inventory and not a lot of buyers. In those situations, it is very tough because you just don't have the population of buyers. You don't have the economic engine to support it. And then you usually get urban blight and the properties fall apart. And that's totally unattractive. Not talking about that situation. Talking about a buyer's market that is probably driven by economic reasons such as what we have now, high interest rates. High interest rates means people pay more when they borrow to get a mortgage, and therefore they're reluctant to get it because they get less house for the same amount of money, and they usually want to wait. And that creates a backlog of properties sitting on the market and fewer buyers. So in a situation like that, it's a little bit different. So what sells best during that type of market? The things that have the most intrinsic value. So what are we talking about? Intrinsic value. One, location. So location is critical. If you have a property that's in a well-desired location, you are going to sell before someone else, even in a buyer's market, because those will be the first places, right? So in New York, if it's a brownstone, limestone, if you're near a park, if you're near water, if it's a safe neighborhood, if it's near shopping, if it's near good schools. There's certain amenities, certain things that make a property more attractive. And if you fall into that category in terms of that type of location, it doesn't matter if you're in a buyer's market or seller's market, your property will not sit on the market for a long time, as opposed to if you're in a less attractive neighborhood. And so what does that mean? Only serious buyers, right? So now you don't have to compete with a bunch of sellers, right? You don't have to compete with a bunch of sellers, because a lot of them will pull their stuff off the market waiting for a seller's market, right? So it's the same thing. They're like, well, I'm not going to sell my property for less than what I believe I should get. So only the people who are serious about selling right now are going to put it on the market. And because you have now, serious buyers in the market, because again, only the ones who have money are going to, or are really going to go for it, right? Because the situation now is about high interest rates, then you're going to have a better opportunity to sell at a decent price. Of course, you won't get the most you would ever get, but people will pay for premium. They'll pay for a good location with great amenities and, good neighborhood and all these other things. So there is a benefit, because now you don't have to sift through competing with other sellers and driving your price down, and because you have good value from the jump. I think you have to look at really, and that's really the crux of it, right? So you have less competition from sellers who are not serious. You have serious buyers in the market, because the market is about high interest rates, so people are getting less homes for it. So even though it's a a buyer's market, because of the inventory, you're only going to connect with good people who are ready to buy. You will still get a tremendous amount of equity, because even though it's a seller's market, the prices haven't been driven down significantly like we had the housing crisis, where the values are upside down, or the equity has been diminished. So I think, if you really look at you having real value in your place, the right location, less properties, even though there's a lot of inventory, less properties that are competitive with yours on the market, serious buyers, because the market is driven by economic conditions that only would allow serious buyers to get in the game. I think those are significant benefits to doing it now if you have the right property in the right place. If you're in the wrong place, like I said, if you're in one of those cities where you're seeing still a population decline, it's much tougher, right? And then you have to really be in the right place, because there's still areas in those places, right? It's usually the downtown area near the business districts that are doing well. So if you have, again, the right location there, then you'll gain the equity, you'll get the right price, you'll get the right buyer, and you won't have to play games. So, those are some things that you have to look for in a seller's market, a buyer's market. Some of the benefits of being in a buyer's market. It's all about right place, right time. And that's pretty much it. So I hope that answered your question sufficiently. Not a lot of other significant benefits when, it's a buyer's market. Obviously, there are more benefits to being in a seller's market when you're ready to sell. But I'd like to hear your comments, your thoughts on it. Please like, share, subscribe. Keep the questions coming, and I'll see you next Tuesday.